Hmm. Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 13 of 21 Days of Fear, where I'm going live every day for 21 days, talking about all the ways that fear shows up in our lives to sabotage us and hold us back and keep us in our wounding and in our trauma. And hello, those of you who are here on with me now live, and everyone who will watch this in the future. Today's video is all about the fear of losing our freedom. And this fear shows up in so many ways in our lives. And it's funny. This fear is really funny because this fear, in its fear of losing its freedom, it actually gives its freedom away, right? Which is kind of the paradox of this one here. And it actually gets us in spaces where we're no longer sovereign. So we all have this deep internal drive to be free, right? It is at the core of our species, at the core of our spirit, there is a drive for freedom. And in that, we've also been in this world of form for so long now that we have actually begun to fear our own power. And the fear of our own power has created this world where we push that power outside of ourselves and we gave that power to something outside of ourselves. Call it a god, or call it science, or call it Mother Nature, right? This powerful thing that's outside of ourselves. So because we feared our own power and we've given that power away to something that's externalized, we then created this core fear that we will lose our freedom to this thing that is outside of ourselves. So when we get into the core of our fears of losing our freedoms, we're actually talking about the original fears, which was fear of our own power, right? And I love the Marianne Williamson quote that says, "It's not our darkness that we are most afraid of, it is our light, it is our power." Right? So there is more of an internalized fear around our power than there is for darkness. So the reason that we have organized religion and we have governments and we have gods is because we went through a phase in our evolution, our creation of our species that is now present on the planet. There was a fear of this power, a fear of being creator gods on earth, and a fear of taking full responsibility for all of our actions, all of our thoughts, all of our deeds whilst we are alive. So we created systems to deflect responsibility away from ourselves, to dismiss our own power. And that is religion and government and gods, right? And because we then created these systems that were ultimately designed to control our power, we also gave those systems the power to take away our own freedom, where we can be incarcerated or we can be ostracized from the community and shunned and shamed. And, you know, back in the day when religion was being formed, there was the leper colonies and things like that. You were stoned out of the civilization, out of the community. So when we start to look into these deeper fears now that are present around fear of losing our freedom, we have a lot of stories that are not true that continue to manifest and keep us giving our freedom away to a government or to a religion or to a school or to a person or to a thing. And we don't even realize that we're giving away our freedom, yet we are still terrified that we're going to give it away. And it keeps us playing into broken timelines. We were having this conversation last night at the gathering that I held, and we were talking about things like taxes. And one of the examples that I was sharing was that in the United States, federal tax is only actually legally for federal employees. So only if you worked for the federal government do you have to pay that tax. Yet the majority of working citizens in the United States pay federal taxes because they have a fear that if they don't pay that tax, that their freedom will be taken away. Yet in paying that tax, they're giving away their freedom, which is their money. Right? So it's so twisted how this fear has corrupted us and created this world where we give our freedom away under the disguise of being afraid that we're going to lose our freedom. Does that make sense? Give me like a thumbs up in the emojis, or yeah, I got you in the comments. So I just want to make sure that this is really making sense, because this fear is constantly looping backwards. And you know, the language around how we describe these backward looping cycles can be sometimes a little loopy, right? Okay, so when we're starting to go into the fears of our freedom, we first must have to recognize and take our power back, because being afraid of our own inner power, of our creative potential, is what created this fear of losing our freedom to begin with, because that's what created these externalized systems that we then give our power to have power over us, so that then we have the appearance of freedom. And, you know, it's so funny that world and countries as we know them, right? These illusions that we created called governance and country, which is the result of us fearing our own power and giving that power to some group of people to control us, to keep us safe. And in countries where there is this illusion of freedom, the United States, where I live being one of them, is some of the most unsovereign and non-free places to be, where there is this illusion that we have all these freedoms, yet people are struggling to pay their taxes, to pay into the very system that they created to have power over them, to keep them in the illusion that they have freedom to begin with. Yet in paying these thousands of dollars in taxes every month, people don't have the freedom to go and care for their body, care for their children, care for their health. It's like, it's a tremendous backward looping spiral that, you know, for me, what I've really been doing is really studying the law and watching people like Robert Kiyosaki educate the masses on the language of finance, the language of taxes, the language of law. And, you know, the majority of people don't even realize that in the US alone, our law systems are working in maritime law, which is the law of the water, the law of the sea. And if you enter into a court, you're entering into maritime law. Yet we are land-bound creatures. We live on the land, we don't live on the sea. So if you understand natural law, which is law of the land, and you know the language of it, you can walk into a court, walk into an incarceration, and know exactly what to say to actually get all your charges dismissed. Because the system that we have created is based in our fundamental fear of freedom, of losing our freedom, which ultimately keeps us in a space where we have no freedoms, because we're so afraid of losing our freedom that we give our freedom away so that we never have to experience losing it. And then have created this whole world where it appears like we're free, yet we're slaving away to a system that is keeping us enslaved because we were afraid to give it our power. And someone is asking, how do we gain it back? Well, for me, that's meant becoming sovereign from governance. And there's a lot of incredible movements of people that are learning natural law, learning how to create their own sovereign entities within themselves so that they can unplug from the governance systems, right? And the thing is, though, if you decide to stop paying into those systems, you best be sure that you have processed your karma with those systems and your fears of losing your freedom, because that fear of losing your freedom keeps you paying into those systems and ultimately keeps you unfree. Unfree? Yeah, we'll say it like that. Unfree, right? So you've got to first process all of those deeper inner fears of what will happen to me if I stop playing into this system, which is just societal conditioning. It's a program that keeps us locked into that system to begin with. So the first thing is you've got to process any of those fears that are coming up for you that might be keeping you locked into paying into these systems that are corrupt, right? Fold in what you learn and rebirth what you will have. Just reading into some of the comments here. So first have to process those fears, right? Then we have to be in our sovereign space within ourselves, right? So that means our energy is no longer feeding into the collective energy grid, which means that all of our ungrounded, unprocessed trauma and fear in our lower energy body must be integrated, healed, and transitioned into light, so that those webs that, like, this is what happens, okay? So say you decide you no longer want to pay off your credit because credit is an illusion, it's a scam, and it keeps people literally slaving away to a system that never had the money to begin with, right? I had this whole conversation last night. So you decide, I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to pay this because it never existed to begin with. And me paying it, I'm actually debting myself and making someone else rich that never had that money to begin with, right? So it's not actually me paying something back. It's me creating money for someone that never had it to begin with. So I decide I'm not going to pay that. Then what happens? That if I have any fears around losing my freedoms internally or around being in debt, then that fear in my lower energy body is going to be sending messages out into the morphogenetic grid that says, hey, I need all my fear buddies to come in and to convince her to not do this because it's not good, right? And I'm going to be afraid of this. So then you start getting the calls from the collectors. You start getting the feedback from the people in your environment that's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. And you start getting all this fear feedback that is, remember, from day 12, what is happening in your external reality is revealing what is hidden within yourself. So if you start getting that feedback that is convincing you that what you're doing is something you should be afraid of doing, that means that that fear is still inside of you, and that must be processed and integrated if you're ever going to claim your sovereignty, which is the path of breaking this system of losing our fear of freedom. That will transition us into a world where we're no longer broken and separated by all these different governances that we're giving our power away to, that is ultimately keeping us sick, slaves, and corrupted and separated from each other. And in separation, there's war. There's racism, there's bigotry, right? There's all of these things that are the result of us giving away our power that created these original systems that now, because they've had all this power, I mean, billions of people have been feeding these systems power. So those people who are involved in these systems are power high. They're on a power high. And they will do anything to keep that power, which means manipulating you through fear to keep you afraid of losing your freedom. When in reality, they're just manipulating you to continue giving them your power. So the fear of losing our freedom is so much deeper. And it's the fear that keeps us stressing over taxes, arguing with each other over politics and over policies and all of these things, that when we're all truly sovereign beings who are owning our creatorship, we're not playing out these dynamics. We don't have feedback coming into our reality that's counter to what we are experiencing and choosing for ourselves, right? So if you have, how do we have some, so here's a good sign that this fear might be showing up in your life and potentially sabotaging you from thriving, is one, fear of authority. So that would be fear of police officers. So if you get nervous, if you get pulled over, anxious when you get pulled over, if you like get uncomfortable when you're walking by a police officer, all these things would trigger that there is still a fear of losing your freedom, because police officers, at least in this part of the world where we live, are the example of this externalized governance that we've created, right? If you get afraid when you're walking through customs and you're walking through borders, this is another great way to recognize if this fear of losing your freedom is internally hiding from you and manifesting as you giving your power away, right? So if you feel uncomfortable around police officers, if you get nervous when you pull over, if walking through customs borders makes you a little queasy, these are things that you can look for. Also, if you spend, a lot of your time and energy unhappy about your tax situation, stressed out about paying those bills, feeling like it's not right for you, yet you're afraid to really pull out of it and to understand how, there are multi-billionaires who don't pay taxes legally, right? So there are ways to break free and become sovereign from these systems. If that fear is there, though, that fear won't let you do that, even though it is very legal to do so. So long as you know the language of the law and you've done your due diligence to understand your rights as a human being who lives on land and not on sea, right? So, there are countless examples, Amazon being one of them, of companies that have huge tax write-offs and don't pay taxes. So this is something that we can unplug ourselves from, but only if these fears are no longer holding us back. So if those stories are coming up when you're still paying taxes into something that, like, you're not even a federal employee, and you're having all this stress around it, then really check in with if the fear of losing your freedom is resulting in you giving your power to someone to actually keep you from your freedom, right? So let's see if any other comments came in. Cool. All right, everyone, I'm gonna hop off now. So if you have any questions on this as you watch the replay, for those of you who are coming in and joining us on the replay, do leave them in the comment section of any of the videos. You can find the 12 days that came before this one on my YouTube page at Rainbow Jones, or on Instagram, or on my Facebook page. They're available all over the place, so go check them out. We are leading up towards the end of our 21 days with day 14 tomorrow. I look forward to connecting with you all then. I hope that you have an amazing day or evening wherever you are at in the world. Bye.